You know what? I was looking at my bank account last week and I had this weird moment of, I had almost the exact same amount of money as I did 2 years ago. Same checking balance, same credit card debt. It's like I'd been running on a treadmill for 24 months and somehow ended up in the exact same spot. And here's the thing that really got me. When I talked to my friends about it, 4 out of 5 of them said the same thing happened to them. They called it a rough year, a transition period, a time to just survive and reset next year. But what if I told you that these so-called reset years are costing you way more than you think? And I'm not just talking about the money you didn't save. I'm talking about something far more expensive. My name is Elon Musk, and I spend way too much time thinking about the psychological traps that keep people broke. If you're someone who feels like you keep hitting the financial reset button every year or two, promising yourself this is the year I'll finally get ahead, but somehow ending up back at square one, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if this helps you out. Because today we're going to talk about something nobody in the personal finance space wants to address: the compounding cost of financial reset years and why they're silently destroying your ability to build wealth. Look, let's be real about what a financial reset year actually is. It's when you tell yourself, you know what, this year was crazy, I had unexpected expenses. The car broke down, I switched jobs, I moved, I had medical bills, whatever. I'm just going to focus on surviving this year, and next year I'll really get serious about saving. Sound familiar? Here's what most people don't realize. According to a study from the Financial Health Network, roughly 54% of Americans report having at least one financially disruptive year every 2 to 3 years. That's more than half of us. And among millennials and Gen Z, that number jumps to 63%. But here's where it gets really interesting. When researchers dug deeper, they found something shocking. Most of these disruptive years weren't actually that disruptive. The average unexpected expense that caused people to declare a financial reset year: $2,400. $2,400, that's it. That's what's causing people to abandon their financial goals and hit the reset button. Now I know what you're thinking. Elon, $2,400 is a lot of money when you're living paycheck to paycheck, and you're absolutely right. But here's the problem: if $2,400 is enough to completely derail your entire financial year, you're not in a temporary crisis. You're in a systemic problem, and calling it a reset year is just giving yourself permission to not deal with it. Let me show you the math on this, because this is where people's minds get blown. Let's say you're 28 years old and you make $55,000 a year. That's roughly the median income for someone in their late 20s in the US. You've decided you want to start saving for retirement, and you're aiming to put away $5,000 a year, about $417 a month. Year 1, you're doing great. You save your $5,000. Year 2, something happens: car repair, unexpected medical bill, whatever. You declare it a reset year. You save nothing, zero. Year 3, you're back on track, another $5,000. Year 4, another reset year. Maybe you moved, maybe you switched jobs, zero saved. This pattern continues. Every other year is a reset year where you save nothing. Now most people look at this and think, okay, so I saved $5,003 times instead of 6 times over 6 years. I'm down $15,000. That sucks, but I can catch up. No, you cannot. And this is the hidden cost nobody talks about. If you invest that money with a conservative 8% annual return, here's what actually happens over 30 years. Scenario A: consistent saver. You save $5,000 every single year for 30 years. Total invested, $150,000. Final balance at age 58, $566,416. Scenario B: reset year saver. You save $5,000 every other year for 30 years due to reset years. Total invested, $75,000. Final balance at age 58, $170,148. The difference, $396,268. You invested half as much money, but you ended up with less than a third of the wealth. That's the cost of compounding that you lost. Those reset years didn't just cost you the money you didn't save, they cost you all the money that money would have made. And here's the thing that really frustrates me about this. That $396,268 you lost, that's not because you were irresponsible. That's not because you made terrible decisions. That's because you gave yourself permission to hit pause, and the market doesn't pause with you. Now you might be thinking, okay, Elon, I get it. Compounding is powerful, but you don't understand my situation. My reset years were necessary. I didn't have a choice. And look, I'm not saying that bad things don't happen. They absolutely do. But here's what I've discovered after talking to hundreds of people about their financial reset years. In most cases, the reset wasn't necessary. The reset was comfortable. Let me explain what I mean. There's this concept in behavioral psychology called temporal discounting. It basically means we value immediate relief over future benefits. When you're stressed about money right now, the idea of just giving yourself permission to stop trying feels like sweet, sweet relief. You get to stop feeling guilty about not saving. You get to stop tracking every expense. You get to just exist. The reset year becomes an emotional escape hatch. I talked to a woman last month, let's call her Sarah, who told me she'd had 4 reset years in the last 5 years. 4. When I asked her what caused them, here's what she listed. Year 1, I was figuring out my career. Year 2, I moved cities for a new job. Year 3, I was adjusting to the new cost of living. Year 4, the pandemic happened. And here's where it clicked for me. Every single one of those reasons was real. They were all legitimate challenges. But here's what Sarah admitted when I pushed her. She never actually ran the numbers to see if she could have saved something, even $1,000, even $500. She just decided at the beginning of each year that it would be a reset year, and that decision became a self-fulfilling prophecy. She gave herself permission to not try. This is where it gets really interesting because there's actually research on this. A study from Ohio State University found that people who experienced a financial setback and then consciously decided to reset their financial goals took an average of 3.7 years to return to their previous savings rate. People who experienced the same setback but adjusted their goals without declaring a full reset, they returned to their previous savings rate in 1.2 years. The reset itself was more damaging than the actual setback. But wait, it gets worse, and I say this with love, but you need to hear this. Reset years don't just affect your savings, they affect everything. They create what I call the financial cascade effect. Here's how it works. You declare a reset year, you stop saving. That feels bad, so you also stop looking at your budget as closely. Why bother tracking expenses if you're not working toward a goal? Then you stop checking your credit card balance as often. Then you make a few impulse purchases because, hey, this year doesn't count anyway. Then those purchases add up. Then you end the year not just at zero, but actually in more debt than you started with. I've seen this pattern so many times I could set my watch by it. A study from the Journal of Consumer Research found that people who mentally categorize a time period as a write-off spend an average of 34% more during that period than they would have otherwise. 34%, you're not just failing to save, you're actively spending more because you've given yourself psychological permission to not count it. Let me give you a concrete example. Let's go back to our 28-year-old making $55,000. If they have a genuine reset year where something major happens and they can't save, but they maintain their normal spending, they end the year at zero savings for the year. But if they have a psychological reset year where they give themselves permission to check out and they spend that extra 34%, on a $55,000 income with typical expenses, that's roughly an extra $8,000 in spending over the year. So they don't end at zero, they end at negative $8,000. They've added debt. And here's the really insidious part. Now when they try to reset the following year, they're not starting from zero. They're starting from negative $8,000. So before they can even begin saving, they have to dig themselves out of that hole first. This is how people end up in their late 30s making good money, but having no retirement savings. Not because they weren't making enough, but because they kept hitting reset and the reset kept getting more expensive. Now let's talk about something even more brutal. You can't get time back. Look, if you're 28 and you lose a year of savings, you might think, no problem, I'll just work an extra year before I retire. I'll save until I'm 66 instead of 65. But that's not how compound interest works. The money you invest at 28 has 37 years to grow before you're 65. If you invest $5,000 at age 28 with an 8% return, it becomes $78,227 by age 65. If you skip that year and invest $5,000 at age 29 instead, it becomes $72,433 by age 65. You didn't just lose $5,000, you lost $5,794 in growth. And here's the kicker, to make up for that lost year, you can't just save an extra $5,000 at the end. To make up for the lost compound growth, you need to invest an extra $6,257 in your final year to break even. Every reset year gets more expensive the longer you wait. And this is what kills me about the advice to just catch up later. You can't, not really. Not without significantly increasing your savings rate, which, if you could do that, you wouldn't have needed the reset year in the first place. The math is just brutal here. For every year you delay starting, or for every reset year you take, you need to save increasingly larger amounts later to make up for it. The 28-year-old who saves $5,000 a year ends up with way more wealth than the 38-year-old who saves $10,000 a year, even though the older person is saving twice as much. That's the power of time. All right, so what do we actually do about this? Because I'm not just here to depress you. I'm here to give you a different framework. First, stop declaring reset years. Seriously, stop it. That phrase needs to be eliminated from your vocabulary. Instead, here's what you do. Adopt the minimum viable savings approach. Instead of thinking, I either save my full goal amount or I save nothing, think, what's the absolute minimum I can save this year while dealing with this challenge? Maybe it's $500, maybe it's $100, maybe it's $50 a month. I don't care what the number is less important than the habit. Here's why this works. That study I mentioned earlier about people bouncing back from setbacks. The people who recovered quickly didn't stop saving. They reduced their savings. They scaled back, but they didn't reset. The person who saves $100 a month instead of $417 because they're having a tough year is in a fundamentally different psychological and financial position than the person who saves nothing. They maintained the identity of being a saver. They kept the habit alive. And habits, not motivation, are what create lasting change. Let me show you the math on this because it's actually encouraging. Going back to our 30-year timeline. Scenario C, flexible saver. You save $5,000 in good years, but in tough years, you drop to $1,200, just $100 a month. Let's say you have the same number of tough years as the reset person, 15 tough years and 15 good years. Total invested, $93,000. Final balance, $283,669. That's $113,521 more than the reset person, even though you only invested $18,000 more. You captured that compound growth. Second strategy, build your reset prevention fund first. Remember how I said most financial reset years are triggered by unexpected expenses averaging $2,400. Here's the thing, that's totally manageable if you plan for it. Before you start aggressively saving for retirement, before you start investing, build a small emergency fund specifically designed to prevent reset years. Call it your anti-reset fund. Make it $3,000 to $5,000. This isn't your full 6-month emergency fund, that comes later. This is the universe just threw something at me, but I'm not going to let it derail my entire financial year fund. Once you have that buffer, you can save and invest more aggressively because you know you're protected against the things that typically trigger resets. Third, track your reset triggers. Here's an exercise I want you to do. Think back over the last 5 years. Write down every time you told yourself this is a reset year or I'll start fresh next year. Now write down what triggered it. I guarantee you'll see patterns. Maybe it's always in January when the holiday bills come due. Maybe it's always when you switch jobs. Maybe it's always in the summer when you take trips. Once you see the pattern, you can plan for it. If you know you tend to overspend during the holidays and then declare January a reset month, you can start setting aside money in October specifically for holiday expenses. You've turned a trigger into something you planned for. Look, here's the bottom line. Financial reset years feel like a break. They feel like you're being realistic and giving yourself grace. And listen, I'm all for grace, but what they actually are is expensive, ridiculously expensive. That $396,268 difference we calculated earlier, that's a paid-off house in many parts of the country. That's your kid's college education. That's early retirement. That's travel. That's security. That's options. And here's what really gets me. That money isn't going to someone else. You're not losing it to taxes or bad investments or someone scamming you. You're losing it to nothing, to the decision to hit pause on your own life. Every year you declare a financial reset is a year that money could have been working for you. And money is a tireless employee. It shows up every single day, 365 days a year, making you more money as long as you let it. The person who never takes a reset year and the person who takes a reset year every other year aren't living slightly different financial lives. By the time they hit 60, they're living in completely different economic realities, and the gap between them started with a decision to either push through or hit pause. I want to be clear about something. I'm not saying you should never adjust your goals. I'm not saying you should save aggressively when you literally can't afford to eat. What I'm saying is stop using the reset year as an emotional escape hatch. Stop giving yourself permission to quit. Because here's the truth that nobody wants to tell you. There will always be a reason to reset. Always. There will always be an unexpected expense, a tough year, a transition, a challenge. Life is literally just a series of those things with some good stuff mixed in. The people who build wealth aren't the people who never face challenges. They're the people who face challenges and keep saving anyway, even if it's less, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it's just $100 a month. So here's your action item. I want you to look at your last financial reset year. Calculate how much you would have had if you'd saved even $100 a month during that year instead of nothing. Then calculate what that money would be worth in 20 or 30 years. Let that number sit with you. Then I want you to promise yourself that the next time life gets hard, you're going to adjust, not reset. You're going to scale back, not quit. You're going to save something, not nothing. Because that's how wealth gets built, not through perfect years, not through enormous salaries, but through the stubborn refusal to hit reset every time things get difficult. If this video helped you see reset years differently, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me about your last reset year. I want to hear what triggered it. And if you haven't already, subscribe because we're going to keep having these real conversations about money that nobody else wants to have. I'll see you in the next one.